So welcome Peter Bradley from Torsion to the Incentral Download.
Ronnie, thanks very much. It's great to be here.
No, it's wonderful to have you on the program. So what I want to do, when we sort of do these downloads, we just really have a chat. And, one of the things our audience really likes to hear is the career path that some of the people I'm interviewing have had, insofar as where have they gone, how did they get to where they've got to. So tell us a bit about the Peter Bradley story.
Sure. So I started out as a programmer and moved into business consulting and solution architecture. I was basically a SharePoint guy for about 15 years. Worked first of all in Australia, then came over to the UK, and I was doing that as well. I was a SharePoint architect consultant for a long time. Worked in countries around the world and in businesses big and small. The problem that we're solving at Torsion is one that very much grew out of that consulting career, where out of all of the hundreds of clients, SharePoint clients that I worked with throughout that time, every single client seemed to have the same problem, regardless of industry size or vertical or what have you. And that problem was the permissions, or who has access to what information, what files, folders, SharePoint sites. It just gets out of control every time. Every single client had the same problem, and none of the solutions that I saw on the market, or none of the things that I was able to recommend as a consultant, I saw them failing over and over again. They just didn't seem to solve the problem. And I just kept thinking about it over and over. As I was working and being a consultant, I just kept thinking about, why is this happening? Why have we as an industry not found a better way to solve this problem? And it was a 2 a.m. light bulb moment. One day when I was working on a client, it's like, mate, wait, I know what is going to solve this problem. I know how we can solve this. I know broadly what a solution would look like, how it would work, how it would be priced, how it would be rolled out. I know broadly what this would look like to genuinely solve the problem. And the more I thought about it, the more convinced I became of that. Eventually, so much so that I decided to leave my whole consulting career behind to go and start a startup and build it myself.
Right. How long ago was that?
I first just started thinking about it, goodness, probably 6 or 7 years ago. Made the decision to take the plunge about 4 years ago, and it's been a long journey to where we are today, with with the product fully baked and customers and partners on board, and it's really starting to resonate. Every person that we show this to, and we're now demoing sort of 2 or 3 times a day, the response is pretty consistent. It's just, wow, this is fantastic. This is going to work where everything else has failed, and customers, partners, even Microsoft themselves are getting pretty excited about it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think what's excellent is, the ability for a consultant to identify a problem is one thing, but to then have the gravitas to go out there, put everything on the line and build a product in such a rapidly changing environment that we're in. Like, SharePoint changes regularly.
Yeah, it does.
I mean, kudos to you. Let me come back to, the problem that you say, was file permissions, right? So that's a really broad statement about what a problem might look like. Why don't you just perhaps take our audience through specifically file permissions is something, governance is something within SharePoint that people are talking about a lot, with files, full stop, not just SharePoint, right? It's any type of files, Dropbox, any type of, file repository seems to have, the governance issues. What specifically was it that Torsion sought to solve for?
I think it was a couple of things. First of all, it was recognizing where this problem was most acute, and where it was having the most, where permissions were getting the most out of control, and where that was having the most business impact. And that was at the really low levels of granularity, right? So if you're talking about controlling access at a higher level, right, to a entire SharePoint system, entire network, or maybe the site collection level, IT guys and identity access management best practice has had that problem in hand for a long time. But when you get down to that really low level of granularity, file at a time, folder at a time, and when you put that in the context of the really dynamic, rapidly changing collaboration environments, like within a SharePoint site or within a Microsoft team, when things move around so rapidly inside those spaces all the time, that historical approaches to trying to deliver data governance, which are very IT centric. They just get drowned in the volume of information and the volume of change, and the IT guys don't have the detailed level of understanding of what the information is when the conversation is down at that low level of granularity. And so I started to recognize that the only way this problem is going to be truly solved is if we move the whole conversation away from the IT teams and start engaging the business users who really understand their own information, and try and empower them to make decisions about, well, who needs access to my stuff, and how is that going to change over time. So it was only once we realized that I had to shift the entire conversation away from the people that we'd historically been speaking to about this, that we started to get onto the right track of where a solution could be found.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at file system access. Again, regardless of the subcomponent, be it SharePoint or any other type of file management tool, if you like. I've always found it fascinating that if you take other systems within organizations, like an ERP system, IT doesn't control what goes on in the ERP system. The IT department provides access to the ERP system and creates perhaps the high levels of access, like administrator access within there, et cetera. But it's the finance manager that decides who gets access to create journals and who can see what reports and those sorts of things, because they actually know what it is they're doing. Whereas when we go to file level, it's kind of like, yeah, IT know what they're doing. Let's ask IT to get access to this.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, that's the one kind of system which is so broad in an organization, yet it's still maintained the access has come from IT. So I think what you guys have done by being able to, I guess, extricate IT from that process and turn a SharePoint or a file system access or whatever the actual subsystem is into something that the owner of the data can control and manage. I mean, that's actually just a charmed idea. Technically, however, that's not as simple as it sounds.
No, it's not. And it gets complicated when you start to ask yourself, okay, when we say the business, who do we mean? Like, let's know our users for a moment. Then the account managers, the line managers, the project managers, these guys are really busy. They're absolutely not technical, and they're in no way interested in this subject.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so if you want to, that doesn't mean that they're the wrong people to speak to. It just means the way that we engage them has to be very, very careful. It has to be done right. Because if we ask them to engage with any kind of complexity or use their brains in any way, they're just going to ignore us, right? Because they're not interested in this stuff. They've got jobs to do.
Well, that's what happens when auditors come in, right? The auditors come in and they say to the IT guys, so who's got access to these files? And they'll pick a random directory or a random set of files and say, who's got access? Should they have access? And the IT guys quickly send an email out, or before the auditors come in, they send out a group list report and say, hey, this is what's going on, etc. And then wait and drive the managers of the data. Hey, can you come back to us and tell us who's got access? I mean, the auditors is what creates a lot of grief in that space, right? And even
absolutely, yeah. Depending on which industry you're talking about, if you try and run a process like that, you're up for fines and regulatory strife before you even got the answer to the question, right? You got to know it straight away, or you're not going to pass the spot checks, that kind of thing. So when we decided that, okay, we're going to have to engage these business users, but business users are difficult, right? You want their attention on something they don't care about. It's got to be extraordinarily simple, literally no more than 2 seconds of their time. And that's it. You can't ask them for any more than that. And so what we did was to say, okay, how can we automate this whole thing from start to finish, the whole process of seeing a file, understanding who has access to it, understanding which of those people should or should not have access, which files are at risk, which ones aren't, figuring when we spot problems, figuring out which business user to actually tell about the problem, ask them the question, have them verify the response, and then automate the solution. That whole thing has to be automated from top to bottom. Right? It's the only way you're going to deal with the scale. It's the only way you're going to engage the business users, because it's the only way you can make it simple enough. and it's the only way you can keep up with the rapid pace of business change, right? Because who needs access to a file or a site or a team today that could be different tomorrow, right? Because the business constantly changes. So it came down to, we got very deep into intelligent automation and machine learning.
And that was 6 years ago?
That's when the thinking started. Yeah, the engineering started about 3 years ago. It's been a long journey to build this and get to this point. But now that we're here, it's getting pretty exciting.
So talk to me. I mean, look, I obviously understand the value proposition. I mean, Accenture's just signed up with you guys as the exclusive partner here in Australia and New Zealand, and we're super excited about it. We can absolutely see the value that it brings to the broader channel, let alone the clients at the end point. So we're super excited, and we're super excited to work with you guys in the UK and the EMEA markets and the US too. So I kind of know the answers to some of the questions I'm asking you, and they are targeted because I think that they're really the important things that have driven us to take on your solution. And get so excited about bringing it into the market. So talk to me and our audience a little bit about some of that automation and some of that intelligence of working out what's what, who's who, et cetera, that you mentioned.
Sure. Just at a high level. So Torsion is an engine running either as a subscription engine in the cloud or as a piece of software that runs in the customer's data center or private cloud. We connect from the Torsion instance to each of the systems that the customer is already using for managing their information. So we'll create a connection to their Office 365 tenant and a connection to their file share server and so forth. And then Torsion watches, it monitors absolutely everything that's going on. Right? So we see every file, every person, every instance of a person accessing a file, every instance of a person having access or the ability to do anything or not do it. We watch it all in real time at massive scale. We build up an index of all of this information, and then we mine it within an inch of its life. All kinds of data analysis, machine learning, tearing it apart, looking for insights, looking for the needles in the haystack where this person has access to that file and it just doesn't look right, or it might betray a governance policy, or it just seems suspicious. We spot that stuff, and we've trained our models and
sorry to interrupt you, but you're reading governance policies as well?
Yeah, so corporate data governance policies can be configured into the tool, and then Torsion will automatically enforce them. On top of that, a lot of the issue detection doesn't actually need governance policy. Sometimes we can just see, look, that just something just doesn't pass the sniff test, right? And so we can just spot it and go, no, wait, that doesn't look right. And so we'll flag it and then get that automatically resolved.
And part of that resolution is that alerting the owner. How intrusive does it become for an owner? Particularly when you're rolling it out. So you put Torsion in, and there are, we know that there are tools that will provide all the reporting, and there'll be IT-based tools to report back to IT that these things are happening, or that that who's got access to what. They're not necessarily intelligent enough to work out whether they're right accesses or wrong accesses, like some of the some of that intelligence you have within the Torsion product. Yeah. But if you're rolling this out into a new environment, into a new client that has an existing environment with really poor identity management and, no real governance or poor governance, how intrusive does this whole thing become for the users? Do they constantly get alerted, hey, this person's got access, what's going on here? How does that work?
Yeah, no. And obviously that's something we've paid a lot of attention to. And actually what you describe is sort of one of the biggest areas of adoption of the Torsion tool right now is cloud migrations, right? I mean, clients all over the world are moving from legacy on-premise systems to the cloud, and they always want to clean up their permissions and clean up access as part of the move. So Torsion has a big play there. So absolutely, when Torsion gets plugged into an existing estate and on minute one, there's a rat's nest of crazy permissions and complex access all over the place. So yeah, we can go through and spot all the problems, but no, we don't just bury the data owners in notifications. We'll prioritize them by, well, which are the issues that are most important. We'll engage the business users subtly, gradually. Maybe one notification a day. Hey, here's 2 or 3 things we need you to take a look at, and then we'll leave them alone, right? So it's very careful to not drown people in issues. The only time we'll get very assertive is if we spot something which is absolutely critical, as in, the board papers are accessible by the junior intern, right? If we spot something like that, then, we've got to turn the volume up a bit, and we will do that. But generally, no, it's quite subtle. It's quite careful in the way that we engage people.
And it's integrated, right? So from a SharePoint perspective, if somebody puts a file into SharePoint, right at the time they're putting the file in, they can start to play with some of the metadata, and they can actually decide who they want to have access, either at a file level if they want to get that granular, or at a direct level, or at a site level.
Yeah, that's right. So the whole Torsion user experience is embedded into the host application where people are already working every day. If they're working in the SharePoint sites or the Microsoft Teams, then they won't actually realize when they engage with Torsion that they're engaging with a separate tool, right? It looks like it's part of the host application. They don't have to leave their existing workflow in order to do that. And that's obviously very important because, these are business users we're talking about. If we require them to go and log into something else, that's already too confusing. We've probably lost 9 out of 10 of them if we ask them to do that. Yeah. So no, we don't.
So let's take the example then of someone going on maternity leave.
Mm-hmm.
And how can Torsion help in that type of scenario?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things. So if somebody's going on maternity leave, we could delegate their access to someone else who might be covering for them. We can, then when that person comes back from maternity, then all of that access could snap straight back, for example, and that might be access to thousands of things, individual documents and sites and teams and CRM records scattered throughout the organization. All of that access could be moved to someone else or delegated or copied to someone else and then snap back. Without anybody actually having to do anything. Another way that we could help is if I share a file with you, Torsion will not only capture that sharing, but it will capture why I'm sharing it. And possibly the reason that I'm sharing that file with you, the reason that it's appropriate for you to have access to that file could be, well, you are covering for Jane who's gone on maternity leave. Normally it's Jane's file. I'm sharing it with you because you're covering for her. Mm-hmm. That's fine. But then when Jane comes back, we can now detect that the reason that you have access is no longer true, right? Is no longer appropriate. Because we understood why you had that access, we can now detect that the reason isn't true anymore, so we can take your access away. And that could happen at, a file at a time, scaled up times 1 million if there's 1 million files in the organization, right? So we're constantly automatically detecting inappropriate access, understanding why people have access, testing those reasons, finding out when they're not true, and then putting those insights to work to revoke access that shouldn't be there anymore. Mm-hmm. And none of that requires IT to manually orchestrate it, right? Torsion will do this completely automatically at massive scale with huge precision.
And in doing so as well, it's not just we'll cut you off. You have the ability to also deprecate the access and let Jane know that, hey, in a week's time, you will be losing access to these files or this data, and give her an opportunity to interact with the owner as well through the process, right?
Yeah, that's right. Because if, when somebody changes roles or if somebody comes back from maternity or what have you, it's never quite that simple, is it? In the reality, on the ground, we have handover periods, or we have complicated little times when people kind of sort of have 2 jobs for a while. Mm-hmm. Or somebody goes on holiday, someone else covers for them. Now they have 2 jobs for a while. These kinds of gray areas, ill-defined areas, periods in time, they happen all the time. So what we don't do is just shut the access off like a light switch, because that would actually compromise the handover period and make life more difficult, not easier. So we'll decay the access gradually. So access which we've identified needs to be revoked, we might leave it untouched for a week, then switch it to read-only for a week, then suspend it for a week, and then we'll turn it off. And the whole time through that access decay cycle, the data owners and the people who are losing access have the opportunity to intervene if they need to. Say, no, actually, wait, this guy still needs access to that site, leave it alone, and so we will. But if they don't do anything, then the access will be decayed gradually.
Right, and the tool will integrate with DLP solutions. It'll integrate with things like AIP. It's not a replacement for; it's an extension of, right?
Absolutely, yeah, and so some of the people that we're working with at Microsoft, as soon as we show the tool to them, they are the first people to recognize that, yeah, this is not competitive with AIP or MIP or anything in the Microsoft 365 stack. It is not competitive with it. We're filling a gap. Right? We're plugging a gap in that stack, which, for organizations that have a lot of sensitive data, they care who has access to it, they're subject to regulations and need to take compliance seriously, then we're filling a gap that Microsoft does not. Part of the way that we do that is to integrate with the DLP capabilities in MIP and build upon them, make them more powerful, put some of the DLP insights to work in making access control decisions.
And then all of that can be reported on, right, and given to the auditors if need be, and auditors can get an immediate view of what's going on. How's the feedback been from some of like the big four and the auditors out there when they catch wind of what you can do?
Yeah, it's been really, really positive. An auditor sees that Torsion gets the company away from the scenario you described earlier, where an auditor's coming and, oh my God, everybody scramble. Right, it gets the company away from that. It gets data access governance and proper access control. It just becomes baked into the furniture of how the organization works. Right, it's not. We make it easy, and so with data governance working well and automated top to bottom and being very, very effective, when an auditor comes along, they see all of this, right? If an auditor says, okay, they point at a Microsoft team, for example, and say, well, tell me who has access to this team or the information in this team and prove to me that that access is correct and appropriate. That used to be a scramble. Right, that was difficult before, but we just make that incredibly simple. We can tell you who has access to everything, why they have it. We can prove that everybody's access is correct and appropriate. If anybody needs to remove their to have their access removed at any point in the future, then Torsion will detect the fact that needed to happen. We'll do it automatically, and proving that the whole thing works is just a piece of cake, right? Everything from reporting to process automation is all there. And so in order to see this, compared to the struggles that they've been used to seeing their clients go through in the past, they see this and go, okay, you guys absolutely do have this in hand. This is under control. Moving on.
Yeah, okay. And so what about external file sharing?
Yeah, it's a big thing, right? So particularly in Office 365 now, where every tenant is an extranet, anybody can share anything externally if that's been turned on. So we'll allow the business to get perfect control and visibility of external sharing, at the file at a time level, if that's where it's happening. Who has access to this file, both internal and external people. Should this kind of information be available externally? Yes or no? Is it? Where? Shut it down. Finding all of that stuff, plugging those gaps, correcting those configurations, revoking sharing where it shouldn't be. We make that all pretty easy.
So you could, I guess, then you could put Torsion in and get a snapshot view of what's actually happening in your environment. Put it in, let it run for a few weeks and say, hey, this is what we pick up without putting too many governance rules in place. This is kind of just what the tool's picked up on its own about who's got access to what. And if nothing else, if you just want an audit of what's going on in your environment, well, here's the audit and here's how we can skin all of your data that we can then start to make some clever decisions on.
Yep. And absolutely, and we encourage our customers to do that. We offer a 30-day free trial, and we're more than happy for customers to put it in. Don't do too much configuration, just let the tool prove itself. So run the reports, get some visibility, clean up some issues. And then at the end of that period, we've not had a customer yet who hasn't said, oh yeah, no, we're going to keep this, right? Because it does prove itself every time.
And the way people buy Torsion, I mean, obviously in Australia, our channel partners will come through us, and we'll work with them and their clients. But the SaaS model, perpetual license, how does the Torsion licensing model work?
Yeah, it's a SaaS model. So based on based on annual subscriptions, where the number of seats you need will usually, if you're an Office 365 customer, then the number of seats you need is usually going to correspond with the number of Office 365 seats that you need.
Mm-hmm. And so,
Um,
and it's just an
yep.
annual license, and
Yeah. So we can offer monthly as well, but most customers choose annual. And Torsion is sold exclusively through our partners, so we don't sell direct. And in ANZ, that's in Centra.
Yeah, fantastic. And as I say, we're super excited about this. I think it solves a massive gap that sits in the market. Kudos to you for, as I said earlier, for A, identifying the issue, B, having the gravitas to come up with the idea to go solve it, and then actually solving the problem. I think the problem's only going to get bigger too, right? As we start, you mentioned Dynamics or CRM and CRM records, and there's all manners of different things that people get access to, and we've totally put the power of sharing into the end user's hands now. And it's almost like giving the child a whole bunch of candy and say, have at it. And give out as much candy as you want to whichever of your friends you'd like. DLP will maybe put the gate up so you can't get into their house, or you're not allowed to take that piece of candy through the gate. But it doesn't actually solve for whether you should be even standing at the gate to start with, right?
No, that's right. And if you think about, well, who actually knows who should be able to handle that piece of candy and who shouldn't?
Yeah.
The only people that can make that decision is the bloke who made the candy in the first place, right? So we want to empower him to make that decision, but then we want to do that in a way that he's actually going to engage with it, because it has to be incredibly simple and 99% automated. So that's how it works. And you mentioned other systems. I mean, this is not just about files. I mean, files are the classic one. And various statistics suggest that 80% of all business data is actually stored unstructured in files. So it's a pretty good place for us to start. But this problem absolutely exists in CRM, in enterprise chat rooms, in source control systems. We'll be plugging Torsion into things like GitHub and Jira and these kinds of systems. Controlling access to source control repositories, controlling access to CRM records, or to enterprise chat rooms, or to collaboration spaces. We've got a pretty exciting 2020 planned out, where we'll be connecting Torsion to just about anything, including, of course, legacy systems. There's not just the shiny new ones, because there's plenty of data in legacy file shares and old SharePoint systems and so forth, and those systems are not going away. And they're at risk right now when people have access and permissions within those systems that they shouldn't have access to information that it is not appropriate for them to know about. That information, and therefore the business, is at risk.
Absolutely.
So Torsion will be plugging into those systems and doing what we do wherever the information lies.
Yeah. So if you're a client looking at it now, and I'm going to make a big leap of faith here. I suspect that as you add more connectors, how is your licensing going to be based on different connector types? Have you worked any of that out yet? Am I putting you too far on the spot here, Peter? Or
no, that's okay.
Part of it, like here's a new thing that you can connect to. What's the plan?
Yeah, so if you're so there's 3 levels of subscription, so standard, premium, and enterprise. The main difference being the kinds of systems that you're allowed to connect to. So if you're using Torsion in the cloud, you're using just a simple Torsion subscription, and you're connecting it to cloud-based systems such as Office 365, you can do that in standard. If you want to use Torsion in the cloud against on-premises information systems like file shares or SharePoint on-prem, then to do that as well, you need to be in premium. And if you want to install Torsion completely on your own servers and not use our cloud-based entity at all, then you're welcome to do that. And for that, you need to be in enterprise.
Okay. And then whatever connectors, depending on which one you're doing, based on where the data is going to sit for the connectors that you're creating, assuming you are licensed for the cloud and that you create a connector for another cloud-based service, then immediately the organization will have access to start leveraging Torsion in that cloud-based service.
Exactly, away you'll go. So
fantastic. So your investment today will keep continuing to bring additional functionality and value to you without having to spend more money, so long as you're in the right component of that tech.
Absolutely, yeah. We're innovating every day. We're rolling out improvements and new features constantly. We're making this thing more powerful. We're engaging. We listen very closely to our customers and our partners who are telling us, we need this connector, or we need this change, or we need this to work in this way. We're listening to that and putting that feedback to work in our engineering team almost on a weekly basis. So yeah, the product is evolving fast, and listening to our users to make sure that it's evolving in the right directions.
No, that's brilliant. Look, Peter Bradley from Torsion, mate, thank you very much for taking the time. It's great to see an Aussie being successful, setting up their own business and doing it out of the UK. Well done to you. We look forward to an exciting and it's a new relationship for us, and this video is part of announcing it to the market and what we're doing. So we're really looking forward to having a long-term relationship with you guys and growing as Torsion grows, helping our clients.
As always, mate. It's great to be working with you.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Pete.
All right. Thanks very much, Ronnie.